Today's guest is one of the young voices of local radio. Join me now, it's Kyle Dean out of iHeartMedia Radio in the Minot area. Done a lot of stuff for them right away. You have a couple other stops that we're going to be getting into later in the show. But first, right now, in the present day, tell us a little bit about how you prepare for a broadcast, whether it's first like a game or a sports type thing, or other types of shows, because I know you guys do a bunch of stuff around here.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, thank you, Ben. Yeah, for game-wise, it's kind of learn as you go it was when I first started out, and I had a great teacher. I don't know if you remember Rob Hall, but he was in the Minot area for quite a while, and also Scott Kittell. He was a great teacher, too, trying to figure out prep, and I think the major thing trying to get prep is you never can have enough prep, in my opinion, for that. And I guess when you are trying to contact anybody, you want to try to give it plenty of leeway. Who you want to talk to and who you want to get stats from and everything. It's just trying to get everything organized too. But sometimes it's always hard, Ben. You have so much prep, but then when you're broadcasting, it's like, well, how do you get this out into the broadcast itself? And you definitely don't want to do it all in one time, because that's like using all your material for that. But mostly it's just trying to get organized, make sure you contact the right people that you need to get information from for any stats or anything like that. And prep time is what I always think of to definitely get you organized for any broadcast, especially the sports stuff, because you know how much stuff you need to prep for sports itself. Definitely as the season gets going later on, but also that you have to look at some previous season stuff for a lot of athletes too. So it's just a lot of prep time, I would have to say, Ben.
So you learned that from a couple of local legends here in the professional ranks. I think somehow we got to give one of your old teachers some credit here, old Neil Roberts. What was the most important thing that you learned from your MSU education that you would say you still use today?
Well, I would say Neil has been a mentor for ever since I was in high school and still is today, and throughout the entire college program for the undergraduate degree and also even for my master's degree from Minot State. And he has honestly been probably the best person to give advice to, because he has been in the market for a while. He's done a little bit of everything from TV to even radio to now he runs his own business for that. And the one thing he always says, for just prepping everybody and getting everybody ready for going out into the world is just keep practicing. Even if you are not having a job right now or anything like that, he says, go do some games. Go do them. Just bring your recorder. Get some of that background music background noise, and just kind of do the game while you're there. You don't have to be in a broadcast, and people may look at you, but you're still practicing. And that's the one thing he always said was just go out there, go practice, and then also have somebody listen to your stuff. And that's always been a key, is when you have another ear to listen to, because I think, and he even thought, you're your own biggest critic. And by far, I always criticize my stuff, but when somebody else looks at it, yeah, they say something that's probably better than what you're criticizing for yourself, but then they also notice stuff that you may have not noticed, a lot of those crutches that you may have. But that's one thing I know always Neil said, is just keep practicing. And even if you don't have the time or anything like that, just if you're watching football like on TV or any of the professional sports, even practice on your couch, he said, just because you're still getting that repetition. So Neil has always been a rock, I would say, for my career, and just having that advice throughout his experience that he has had throughout his entire few years or so. I guess more than a few years, Ben, but we won't go into detail about how long Neil's been in the market, I would say, huh?
Okay, yeah, because Neil could use some feedback on his own for some fantasy football, but he's not going to hear from me because we're in the same Nick Dreyer Hendrickson league coming up here. So
he doesn't do so hot, huh?
No, he's doing all right, I guess. Whatever. So you get out of Minot State. Every college kid, when they're done school, they're so happy, and yet they're so confident when they can head into the workforce. Well, tell us about your first gig out of school when it comes to radio, and what kind of surprised you? You thought, like, okay, I've got all this preparation done, learned from the brilliant Neil Roberts, but boy, that just threw me for a loop. Something like that. Did that ever happen to you?
I would have to think about it, just because I know my first radio gig was actually in high school when Clear Channel Radio at the time, now iHeartMedia, as you know, they actually offered me a job part-time, do, just some basic reading the news and going on air, run the Twins games, anything like that. But then, after getting that first full-time job and, with the first big boy job, as I guess people say in Harvey, learning stuff was definitely trying to make the connections, and that's one thing when you're in a community, is trying to make those connections to try to get to know the players, the coaches, and definitely the parents, I would have to say, just because you figure out that parents are vital to everything their kids are involved, and that's part of the community, which entails, a lot of the local businesses too. And, local businesses always support the local sports, and they're all tied in together. The coaches, the players, the parents, it's just crazy how intertwined those communities are in the sporting world. And that's one thing is probably the biggest learning curve is, yes, you may not know everybody right away in a community, but taking your time to definitely get out there and, start making connections is probably one of those things that that was one of the learning curves. And every time you start a new gig somewhere, if you go to a bigger market or smaller market, it's just trying to do your best to, meet one or two or three people. Eventually you'll have a good connection base to definitely make your broadcast, I think, the best for just having those little tidbits about some of those athletes that you may know of from hearing it from one of the parents or so. So I think that's one of those things, those biggest challenges that I've ever faced, Ben.
So besides just learning how to do the job, what do you remember the most from working in Harvey and Jamestown?
Yeah, I would have to bring up the community again for Harvey and Jamestown. But one of the thing is, Harvey definitely was my first gig, and we did the core schools there of Harvey Wells County, Drake Anamoose, and Benson County, and also New Rockford, Cheyenne. And those were, not just one community, but all of those communities. And it was so fun, definitely, to meet all the parents' communities and all the different communities. And then also going up to Devil's Lake all the time for the tournaments and getting to meet all the other broadcasters during tournament time. Definitely Mark Bigley over in Devil's Lake. He was also a mentor, I would like to say, just because he definitely always made a little fun of me because he's a big Packers fan and I'm a big Bears fan. So we always had jabs at each other for that. But he was just so a good mentor also for when I was at a broadcast too. But for those small communities was honestly, for Harvey, was getting to know everybody, and for my first gig. And then Jamestown, it was even a bigger radius because most of the games were at least an hour to 2 hours away, just because we covered all the way in southern North Dakota by Linton, H&B, and Ashley and all those. So it wasn't always just in the Jamestown area. It went from Carrington all the way down to Ashley and Ellendale and Edgeley and all those. So it's just how many communities and how many people that you meet is definitely one of those memories that I enjoyed. And the biggest memory that I by far enjoy was watching Ellendale Edgeley Cullum go win the state title when I was in Jamestown my last year, and that was probably the most fun I ever had because we went to almost every playoff game for that in the Jamestown station, and it was just fun watching them come back from underdogs and win the championship game at the Fargo Dome. So that was probably my biggest memory, definitely in the Jamestown area. And the Harvey area was, the Hornets one year, they didn't make the playoffs for quite a few years. Harvey Wells County did it. And after my first or second year there, I believe they made it after like a 3-4 year drought. And it was just awesome to see the community because, Harvey, big football school, Harvey Wells County is. And it was just fun to see them back in the playoffs again.
Yeah, and this is going to sound like a passing point in your answer, but I do want to get your take on it because I'm an Eagles fan at heart, but I also love the Bears. So how do you see the quarterback and perhaps the tight end battle shaking out? Because at this time of recording, you have like 9 tight ends, then you have Mitchell Trubisky and Nick Foles.
You know what? We might keep all the tight ends. You never know how Coach Nagy does that. But I would have to say the quarterback battle is definitely going to be interesting. I honestly think they're going to start with Trubinsky just because, he's kind of that shoe-in right now. But it's going to be a short leash, I would say, for Mitch. And once one or two mess-ups, it's going to be Nick Foles' time. And he has that magic, as you remember with the Eagles. He always has that little backup magic, and you never know. He can be a starter yet, and I would say, I don't know. The NFC North is always tough, but I hope the Bears make the playoffs, but we'll have to wait and see just because the quarterback battle that will be going on throughout the season. So that's all I can say is just go Bears, and hopefully they do pretty well with the Packers and the Vikes and the Lions.
Yeah, maybe Nick Foles' magic only comes through when he is taken off the bench for the stretch run. So we might likely see that this year for the Bears. So
yep.
Bringing it back to North Dakota and bringing you back to Minot, what kind of got you back to the Magic City? Why'd you want to make the move back to where you went to school and all that stuff?
Family is going to be the big thing here for this. So my wife and I, we actually were pregnant with our first child, and once we had our first child in December of 2016, and we just kind of looked around to move back home because all of our family is here. We both grew up here, and both of our parents are here. Also, our grandparents are here. Many cousins are here too. So we definitely wanted to get back home. I know Jamestown to Minot is only about 3 hours away. But it's so nice to have free babysitters, Ben. I'm just going to say that right now when you move back home for that. But also another thing is, working for my alma mater, Minot State, that was a blast. I loved recruiting students to go for a great education at Minot State University. And going back, I'm like, well, I'm here. Let's go get a master's degree too, just because when you are an employee for Minot State or any of the NDUS, the university system in North Dakota, you do get a discount for some classes. And I'm like, well, let's go have a little fun and see what we can do with this master's degree. And I decided to go with the sports management degree at Minot State University, which pretty broad, but it's like athletic director or anything like that. You can do anything in the sports world. It's not just athletic director, but it can expand quite a bit into any sporting field for that. But I went there, did it 2 years, part-time, trying to raise one kid to 2 kids, and then trying to do classes part-time, writing papers, and also working a full-time job. It got hectic, but once I completed this last May, I think I had the biggest sigh of relief, just because it's like, well, now what do? I don't have to type papers every night. So, but most of the time, just coming back was family related. So that was kind of the major thing, because for my wife and I, family is probably one of the most important things that we ever have for our values, and we wanted our kids to, live close by to their grandparents and a lot of their cousins and everything. So that's kind of was the main thing, Ben, to move back.
So that applies to you, and then you were an admissions counselor, right? So what was your kind of recruiting pitch?
Yeah. So, I actually recruited quite a few states. I recruited in Montana, Wyoming, also part of North Dakota and part of Canada and South Dakota, but I also recruited in Vegas and Chicago. And when you go to Montana and Wyoming, there's a lot of similarities of being a smaller state. Granted, there's mountains over the western side of the states, but it was just one of those things that I always leaned on, that I went to Minot State because of the one-on-one, and you can, get your hands dirty right away to definitely learn your degree. And that was probably the best thing, because I chose broadcasting because I'm not really go learn from a book. I want somebody to show me how to do it, and that's how I learned. And Neil did a great job doing that, in broadcasting, and I know many other professors there at Minot State do that too, if that's, the type of the hands-on degree. But having that, knowing your professors was probably the biggest thing too. If they know you by your first name, you can call your professors by first name. You're not in a class of over 100 or so. It's just nice to have that aspect. And so most of my I guess spiel to for Minot State was it is affordable, but another thing is having that personal connection. And I use a lot of my Minot State references now for anything, trying to figure out to just, get some interviews or anything like that. And it's just crazy how many connections these professors have for just a little bit of everything. So that was my biggest speech, was having those small class sizes and watching your class grow up together and see where they go in different careers, because you know each other on a personal level with those small classes.
It must have been such a drag for you to have to go to Vegas and Chicago all the time to recruit people. Tell me how you survive.
Say that again?
I mean, it must have been so rough going to Vegas and Chicago to recruit people to come to Minot, North Dakota. How much did that wear on you, traveling to cities like that? It must have been awful.
No, I wouldn't say it wasn't awful. Going to Vegas was pretty chill, because I knew a lot of the other admissions counselors from recruiting Montana and Wyoming. So a group of us always got together because we were at the same college fair, same in Chicago too. And it was a little bit different just because big city. But you would be surprised, if you don't know, how many people actually want to get away from the hustle and bustle of the city and go to a little quieter place. And a lot of the sports people, because you meet a lot of sports people in the Vegas and Chicago area that come up because they're looking, for any college that has a good competition, and also, they get the chance to play. And NCAA Division II Minot State was great for a lot of people because they had a chance to play, but at the same time, they also had that one-on-one experience with their coaches and their teachers and everything like that. But honestly, I had a blast recruiting in Vegas and Chicago, and also I did go to a Bears game in Chicago once, so that was fun, going to my first Bears game when I was in there before I flew out for the next afternoon, or the next evening, I would say. So it was kind of fun for that aspect.
Yeah, and I'm sure you weren't recruiting 24/7 when you were out in these places. So we'll let iHeartMedia's shows tackle those topics for you, Kyle. Sounds good, huh?
Yeah, sounds good.
Okay. So do you think, maybe among your classmates or other people that you see broadcasting around North Dakota, do you think coming back to Minot or showing up in Minot is a point of emphasis for local people's career tracks at all? Because I see a lot with teachers, they'll go out to Class B and they want to come back and be at MPS. Does that ever happen with broadcasters?
I would say a lot of people, they love to start in Minot, and Minot's been known for an entry-level market, and there's many of them that, like to stay, like me, because I just grew up here. I love the family aspect, being close and everything for my wife and I, and it is mostly a family decision. But, a lot of my classmates from the college level, they moved quite around, in the Fargo area, still in North Dakota. Some of them are in Montana. Some of them are still local. And I would say, it's up to the individual on what they want to do with their career. And a lot of my classmates, they stuck to broadcasting, but they're also in a different side with their communication degree too. So they're not just like on radio or TV, anything, or video production. They're still doing a little marketing stuff or anything like that. So I think that was the best part of being a broadcasting production major, is that it's such a broad degree, which is a good thing because you're kind of a jack of all trades. And Ben, you would probably know that it's kind of a little bit of everything that you learn in a broadcast major or a communications major. And that local aspect of Minot, I plan on never leaving just because of my family and everything like that. And the opportunities, I think they're great here, and it just depends how the individual is comfortable with what they want to do with their career, I would have to say.
Speaking of best parts, what was it like working with Scott Kittell on a daily basis?
Oh, I loved working with Scott. He's such a great guy, and learning from him for how many years of experience he has. He always has some little trick up his sleeve, knowing how to do this, how to call this part of the game, anything like that. And learning from him was just fun, just because he knows the games. Every game that he broadcast, he always knew something. And I don't know some of the details of like he did for some sports, and you can always go ask him for anything, for any advice. And also, when he knew connections for coaches, he's like, "Oh, I'll ask him. Here's his contact information." And it was nice that he introduced me to a lot of people. help out, make those connections. And working with Scott has been great, and I just absolutely loved it. And like I said, he was one of those that trained me, and that was the best part too when I first started in high school and into beginning of college. And I can never forget that, definitely, because he's part of my career, and he always will be.
This is something I wanted to ask you about working in radio. If you possibly have encountered this before. So I got out of school and I juggled a bunch of part-time radio gigs before I got the full-time work at KMOT. So what was involved with that is when it's around D.C. and you're like post-intern and you used to be an intern there and all that stuff and you make that connection, sure, you get hired for some hours, but sometimes they're really, really bad hours. And I remember I worked at a place where I worked noon to 6 and then midnight to 6 a.m., like later that day. My personal record, now this does include waiting tables at Olive Garden, which I did twice, was I was either working or driving 27 hours in a row. So have you ever had kind of a crazy radio shift that you had to work through? And whether or not that happened, how important is caffeine to a radio broadcaster?
Well, my radio show on KCJV is actually called The Morning Caffeine with Kyle Dean, and a lot of the listeners absolutely love that name just because, I just don't focus. I just don't focus on coffee. There's so many caffeinated drinks, and that's what I love, calling the show like that. Plus, it rhymes pretty good. But, some of those crazy shifts, I've worked mornings before. You get up and get to the studio at 4 or 5 in the morning and prep time and go on air at 6. It just depends on a lot of stuff. But when I was working part-time for, at the time, Clear Channel Radio, and I was still in college, I had that midnight to 6 a.m. shift, and that happened every now and then. That's just how it was, and it was fun. You're the only one in the studio, but you got to just chill, listen to music, go talk on the air, and you always got some cool people calling in, a lot of truck drivers, and my dad was a truck driver for many years, and it was always that I could relate. And many late nights I remember for my dad when he was driving truck, and I always went with him too, and we always listened to the radio too. So it was always fun to talk to some of those people too in the middle of the night, just because there's a lot of people that do listen, at that 3 a.m. mark, and you'd be surprised. But that was kind of one of my craziest shifts like that. But just like you, I worked odd jobs too. I used to work at a restaurant in Minot, did some landscaping for a local business, and then also worked at the radio, and that was sometimes in a whole day. And you know what, I'm glad I learned those experiences, because you learn how to balance a little bit of everything, and you kind of need that in today's world. Definitely, you just kind of balance a little bit of everything so you can round yourself out, I guess you would say.
I want to give a shout out personally. I know it's 7 years later, but to Salem Communications in Arlington, Virginia, was where I was doing those 12 to 6s, and they had an automated coffee machine where you could press a button and get like a double shot mocha. It was like a water cooler, but with like a bunch of coffee in it, and it was free. It was fantastic.
Well, free's the best part, though, when you have that right there at your disposal. So why not?
When are you guys at Minot iHeart getting something like that, or like the free soda at Sirius?
Well, we'll have to wait and see on that. But, I have plenty of coffee already ready to roll in. Whatever caffeinated beverage I drink, it actually switches for me on which one I choose to drink. Sometimes it is a good old pop. Sometimes it is a good coffee, a cappuccino. But you know what? Whatever keeps me going, definitely with the 2 kiddos that sometimes stay up all night, that's the big thing right there for caffeine.
And you're so lucky being able to have the morning caffeine with Kyle Dean. I mean, like, I can imagine. I have a buddy coming up. He's screwed because he doesn't have a catchy name like Dean. He's stuck with a name like Patterson or something. And
I know, right?
I know, it's terrible. So what have been like the biggest events that you've covered with iHeart?
The biggest events, and let's see here. The biggest events I would have to say is the North Dakota State Fair was one of the biggest events for, like, not the sports-related side. I remember introducing last year the concert last year for, I believe it was Chase Rice, and I loved just being up there, getting the crowd pumped and everything like that for the state fair. And there's how many thousands of people right in front of you trying to get pumped for the opening band, but it was a fun time for that. Even if it was only 10 minutes, it was just so much fun, just talking in front of the crowd. And you definitely learn to see if you are afraid of the crowd or not from that, because when you're talking in radio, it's just you and the microphone pretty much that you can see, but you just don't do radio anymore. A lot of everything is multimedia now between video editing and audio editing, so you have to learn a little bit of everything for that. But some of the other events that I would say at iHeart is definitely is doing any of the basketball tournaments. Football playoffs is always fun. Those are every year, but there's just something special when we get to playoffs for any football or basketball, just because there's so much energy, and it's like a lot is on the line when you get to the playoff side of everything. So those events I always enjoy just because of that.
Yeah, to your point about just either being in front of the crowd or being in front of the microphone, it's the same with TV. I mean, I don't see the viewers. We just have the camera in front of us, and you don't even think about all the people that are really watching at home. It doesn't feel like a big crowd, but I guess it does. It hopefully exists for guys like us, But
yes.
Yeah, it's crazy. We'll be cracking jokes in the studio until we get the 10-second cue, and then we got to be ready to go. So
yeah, that's about right. Yep.
Fantastic. So I know I want to ask you a little bit about we all want to get back to the normal. So I don't want to have your answer be about that. What kind of exciting things do you think are on the horizon for you guys at iHeart? Do you have some show ideas you have coming up, or maybe some guests you want to have, or just where do you guys want to go from where you've already been at and accomplished?
Well, I usually focus on KCJB for a lot of stuff, and that is, the news and information station and a lot of the egg stuff. So, I would love to have more local people on there. Definitely any local artist and a local, any of the farming side or anything like that. And, I enjoy sports, but egg is so important in this neck of the woods of the United States, and that's one thing I would like to learn a little bit more. And I didn't grow up for anything farming related per se, but there was always something involved. I mean, my dad he hauled farm machinery as a truck driver, also hauled grain and everything like that, and my mom also worked a lot with farmers too. So we still have that aspect of learning from farmers and ranchers, and I would love to learn more about that, of anything of the sort like that. But it just having that more local aspect is definitely one of those key things I would love to focus on here, definitely in the near future with everything going on. And like you said, normal, what can you call it these days, right, Ben?
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you have that kind of background to know, the importance of just the ag connections and the farmers, because, whenever I would, do the guest weather at the end of the show, I would always say, boy, it's great we're having a beautiful day. And then we'll go off the air, and Joe tells me, well, Ben, the farmers aren't really going to like that because they haven't gotten rain in 3 weeks. I'm like, I'm sorry. Okay?
Yeah.
And then, then I'll be like, oh, geez, good, we're getting this rain finally. I'm not paying attention to the rest of the rain that's washing everything out. So no matter what I say, it's not going to be what the farmers would like to hear or, not be offended by, apparently. So, I mean, I'm glad that you have a better background than me on that.
And I love weather, and that was one of those things actually before I went to broadcasting school in Minot State. I was thinking about being a meteorologist, and I absolutely enjoyed weather. I was one of those people that's always outside when there's always a big storm outside, and I have that energy that I love about weather. So if I ever go back to school again for a third time, it might be meteorology now. You never know.
That's awesome, man. Bring the energy. So what? You're on Morning Caffeine with Kyle Dean, and where else can people find you?
Yeah, so, of course, on KCJB from 6 to 10 a.m., on 9, 10 a.m., and then also social media platforms. I try to get a little bit of everything for social media. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. All you need to do is search Kyle Dean Radio. Kyle Dean Radio, and you can follow me if you want to. I post some things here and there, but most of it is family-based, just because, that's kind of my listener base, too, is a lot of family-orientated stuff. But, of course, got that good old sports when we get into the season. So here's hoping we have a great season this year.
So you're a look at my baby guy or what?
Yes.
No shame. He loves his family. Way to go, buddy.
Thank you, Ben.
All right, everybody. That's Kyle Dean out of iHeartMedia in Minot. Give him a listen every which way we just said. Kyle, thanks a lot for your time, man. We'll see you next time.
No problem, Ben, and you have a good one. Thank you.